The spaceship shuddered violently, throwing Mira against the cold bars of her cell. Alarms wailed, their piercing shrieks drowning out the distant explosions that shook the vessel. Smoke choked the corridors, and emergency lights flashed red, casting an eerie glow. The bioluminescent markings on Mira's skin flared in panic, casting ghostly shadows on the walls. "Help! Someone! Anyone!" Her voice cracked with desperation. Footsteps pounded closer, urgent and chaotic. A figure burst through the smoke. Leo, his face streaked with grime, eyes wild with urgency. He skidded to a halt at the cell door, hands fumbling with his tools. "Hold on, I'll get you out," he shouted over the blaring alarms. The ship groaned as another explosion tore through it, the walls buckling. Mira's heart raced, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "Hurry, it's going to blow!" Leo's hands shook as he worked on the lock, sparks flying from the damaged panel. "Almost there. Stay with me." A deafening blast rocked the ship, throwing them both off balance. The lights flickered, plunging the corridor into near darkness. Mira's markings glowed brighter, a beacon in the chaos. "Now, Leo, please," she pleaded, her voice trembling. With one last desperate twist, the lock gave way. The door slid open with a hiss, and Leo rushed in, grabbing her hand. "Let's go!" They sprinted down the corridor, dodging falling debris and sparking wires. The ship was coming apart around them, the walls buckling under the strain. Mira stumbled, but Leo's grip tightened, pulling her forward. "Don't stop! We're almost there!" His voice was hoarse, but determined. They rounded a corner, and the escape pod bay came into view. But the ship lurched again, a violent jolt sending them sprawling to the floor. A beam crashed down, blocking their path. "No!" Mira's cry was filled with terror. Leo scrambled to his feet, scanning for another way. "This way!" He pulled her into a narrow side passage, their bodies pressed close as they squeezed through. Finally, they burst into the escape pod bay. Only one pod remained, its hatch open like a lifeline. Leo pushed her toward it, but she grabbed his arm, refusing to let go. "You have to come with me." Her voice was fierce, despite the fear. He hesitated for a heartbeat, then nodded. They dove into the pod together, Leo's hands flying over the controls. The ship trembled one last time as he slammed the launch button. The escape pod shot into space, the force pinning them back as the ship exploded in a blinding flash behind them. Silence descended, broken only by their ragged breathing. Mira's chest heaved as she stared at the wreckage, her markings slowly dimming. She turned to Leo, her violet eyes wide with shock and gratitude. "You saved me," she whispered, barely audible. Leo looked at her, still catching his breath. "I couldn't leave you there." A trembling smile touched her lips. "Thank you," he nodded, the weight of what they'd just survived settling over them. But as the pod drifted toward the distant planet of Zerathia, something unspoken passed between them, a connection forged in the crucible of life and death, a bond neither could yet name. The escape pod hummed softly as it glided through the endless black, its navigation locked on Zerathia's distant glow. Inside, the air was thick with the aftermath of their escape, a cocktail of adrenaline, fear, and something else, something unspoken that hung between Mira and Leo like a charged current. Mira sat across from him, her bioluminescent markings pulsing faintly, casting a soft glow across the cramped pod. Her violet eyes flicked to Leo, catching the way he stole glances at her, his jaw tight, his hands restless on the controls. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, but it was heavy, as if every word they didn't say carried weight. Leo cleared his throat, breaking the spell. "We'll hit Zerathia's orbit in a few hours. You okay?" That was intense. Mira's lips curved, a small, knowing smile that sent a shiver down his spine. "I'm alive. Thanks to you. That's more than I expected back there." Her voice was low, almost a purr, and it stirred something in him he wasn't ready to name. He shifted in his seat, suddenly hyper-aware of how close they were, the pod's tight quarters forcing their knees to brush. "Just did what anyone would," he said, but his voice betrayed a hint of unease. Not from fear, but from the way her gaze seemed to see right through him. "Not anyone," she murmured, leaning forward slightly. Her markings flared brighter, a hypnotic dance of light across her skin. "You felt it, didn't you? That pull. When you found me." Leo's breath caught. He wanted to deny it, to chalk it up to the chaos of the moment, but the truth was undeniable. There'd been a spark when their hands met, a jolt that lingered in his skin. "Yeah," he admitted, his voice rough. "I don't know what it was, but yeah." Her eyes softened, but there was a glint of mischief in them, a hint of something daring. "My people sense more than humans do. Emotions, desires, they're like currents in the air. I felt yours in Leo. You're not as simple as you think." He laughed, a nervous edge to it. "You're saying you can read me like a book?" "Not a book," she said, her voice dropping lower, almost teasing. "More like a song. And yours is loud." The words hung in the air, charged with an intimacy that made his pulse race. He leaned back, trying to regain control, but the pod's dim lighting and her glowing presence made it impossible to look away. Before he could respond, a sharp beep cut through the tension. The navigation panel flashed red, a warning blaring across the screen. "Proximity alert," Leo muttered, snapping to attention. He scanned the readings, his brow furrowing. "Something's tracking us." Mira's playful demeanor vanished, replaced by a tense alertness. She leaned over his shoulder, her breath warm against his neck as she studied the screen. "Pirates?" she asked, her voice tight. "Maybe," he said, fingers flying over the controls. "Or something worse. The ship that attacked us wasn't just after cargo. They wanted you." Her markings dimmed, and she pulled back, her expression darkening. "They always do," she said quietly. "My kind. We're rare, valuable to the wrong people." Leo's jaw clenched, a protective instinct flaring. "They're not getting you. Not while I'm here." She looked at him, her eyes searching his face, as if weighing his words. "You don't even know me. Leo, why risk so much?" He met her gaze, unflinching. "Because it's right, and because I feel it too. Whatever this is." For a moment, neither spoke. The pod's hum seemed to fade, the universe shrinking to just the two of them. Then another beep shattered the moment, more urgent this time. Leo cursed under his breath. Pulling up the scanner, a sleek, black ship was gaining on them, its silhouette ominous against the starfield. "We can't outrun them," he said, his voice grim. "But Zarathia's close. If we can land, we might lose them in the markets." Mira nodded, her hand brushing his arm, lingering just a second too long. "Then let's make it to Zarathia," she said, her tone resolute but laced with something softer, something that made his heart skip. He pushed the pod to its limits, the engines straining as they hurtled toward the planet. The black ship loomed closer, its weapons locking on. A crackle burst through the pod's comms, and a cold, mechanical voice filled the space. "Surrender the Auralian. You can't escape." Mira froze, her markings flaring with fear. Leo reached for her hand, squeezing it tightly. "Ignore them," he said, his voice steady despite the danger. "We're not stopping." The pod shook as a warning shot grazed its hull, the impact reverberating through their bones. Leo swerved, dodging another blast, his focus razor-sharp. Mira clung to the seat, her eyes locked on him, a mix of trust and something deeper flickering in her gaze. Zarathia's atmosphere loomed ahead, a swirling blue-green haze. Leo angled the pod for a rough descent, the hull glowing red from the friction. "Hold on," he warned, his voice tight. "This is gonna be bumpy." Mira's hand found his again, her touch grounding him as the pod plummeted. The pursuing ship fired again, a beam sizzling past, but they were too close to the planet now. The pod broke through the atmosphere, shaking violently as it descended into Zarathia's chaotic skyline, a sprawling mess of neon-lit towers and bustling markets. They hit the ground hard, the pod skidding across a dusty landing pad on the edge of the city. The impact jolted them both, but they were alive. Leo unstrapped himself, turning to Mira. Her markings were still glowing, her chest rising and falling with rapid breaths. "You okay?" he asked, his voice softer now. She nodded, her eyes locked on his. "Thanks to you," she said, her voice low and warm, carrying a hint of something that made his skin tingle. He helped her out of the pod, their hands lingering together as they stepped into the humid, chaotic air of Zarathia's marketplace. The city pulsed with life, aliens of every kind bartering, shouting, and weaving through stalls piled high with exotic goods. But the shadow of their pursuers lingered. Leo scanned the crowd, his hand resting protectively on Mira's back. "We need to move," he said, his voice low. "They'll find us if we stay here." Mira nodded, but her gaze lingered on him, her markings pulsing in a slow, rhythmic pattern. "You're not what I expected, Leo," she said, her voice soft but charged. "Most humans would have run." He grinned, a spark of boldness breaking through. "Guess I'm not most humans." Her lips parted, a teasing smile forming as she stepped closer, her body brushing against his in the crowded market. "I'm starting to see that," she murmured, her voice a velvet whisper that sent heat racing through him. Before he could respond, a shadow moved in the crowd, a cloaked figure watching them from a distance. Leo's instincts kicked in, his hand tightening on Mira's. "We've got company," he whispered, pulling her into the throng. They slipped through the market, weaving past stalls and dodging curious eyes. Mira's markings dimmed as she pressed close to him, her warmth a constant reminder of the stakes. The city was a labyrinth, but danger was closing in, and the electric pull between them was only growing stronger. Whatever awaited them on Zarathia, they'd face it together, but the hunters were near, and time was running out. The marketplace of Zarathia thrummed with chaotic energy, a dizzying swirl of voices, scents, and colors that swallowed Mira and Leo as they wove through the crowd. Neon signs flickered above stalls piled with strange fruits and glinting tech, while aliens of every shape bartered in tongues that buzzed like static. Leo's hand stayed firm on Mira's back, guiding her through the labyrinth of bodies, but his eyes darted to every shadow, every cloaked figure that lingered too long. The hunter from the market's edge was still out there, and the weight of their pursuit pressed like a blade against his spine. Mira moved close, her bioluminescent markings dimmed to avoid attention, but her warmth seeped through the thin fabric of her fur-lined clothes, a constant pull on Leo's senses. Her breath was steady but quick, her violet eyes scanning the crowd with a warrior's focus. "They're close," she whispered, her voice low and urgent, brushing against his ear. "I can feel their intent, cold, like a void." Leo's jaw tightened. "Then we keep moving. There's a safe house my crew used to talk about, hidden in the lower districts. If we can get there, we'll have a chance to breathe." She nodded, but her gaze lingered on him, a flicker of something softer breaking through her tension. "You're risking everything for me, Leo. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." He flashed a crooked grin, despite the danger. "Stick with me, and we'll call it even." Her lips twitched, a spark of amusement in her eyes, but it vanished as a sudden ripple passed through the crowd. A stall overturned with a crash, and shouts erupted nearby. Leo's heart lurched as he spotted two cloaked figures pushing through the throng, their movements deliberate, predatory. "They've found us," he muttered, pulling Mira into a narrow alley. The alley was a claustrophobic maze, its walls lined with rusted pipes and flickering hollow ads. The air was thick with the stench of oil and decay, but it offered cover. They ran, their footsteps echoing, Mira's hand slipping into his as they navigated the twists and turns. Behind them, the hunter's boots clanged against the metal ground, relentless in gaining. Leo's mind raced, searching for an escape. The safe house was still blocks away, and the alley was a gamble. Too many dead ends, too many unknowns. But Mira's grip on his hand was steady, her trust in him a fire that kept him moving. They rounded a corner, only to skid to a halt. A third hunter stood waiting, a sleek plasma rifle glinting in their hands, their face hidden beneath a reflective visor. "End of the line," the hunter rasped, their voice distorted by a modulator. "Give us the Auralian, and you walk away." Leo stepped in front of Mira, his body taut, his engineer's mind calculating odds that weren't in their favor. "Not happening," he said, his voice low and dangerous. The hunter tilted their head, almost amused. "Brave. Stupid. But brave." Mira's markings flared, a sudden burst of light that lit the alley like a flare. "You don't know him," she said, her voice sharp with defiance. "Or what we're capable of." The hunter laughed, a cold, mechanical sound, but before they could raise their weapon, a low hum vibrated through the air. Leo's eyes widened as Mira's markings pulsed in a rhythmic pattern, the light seeming to bend around her. The hunter froze, their visor flickering as if caught in a glitch. "What? What are you doing?" they stammered, their voice breaking. Mira's eyes narrowed, her focus absolute. "Buying us time." Leo didn't question it. He grabbed her arm, pulling her past the stunned hunter as they sprinted down another turn. The alley opened into a crowded plaza, but the hum of pursuit was already rising again. "What was that?" he asked, his voice a mix of awe and urgency as they ducked behind a stack of crates. "My people can disrupt tech sometimes," she said, catching her breath. "It's not perfect, but it worked." He stared at her, a grin breaking through his tension. "You're full of surprises, Mira." Her smile was fleeting, tinged with worry. "It won't hold them long. We need to—" A sharp crack cut her off as a plasma bolt seared the crate beside them, splinters flying. Leo yanked her down, shielding her as another shot scorched the ground. The hunters were closing in, their numbers growing, 4 now, fanning out across the plaza. The crowd scattered, screams rising as the air crackled with danger. Leo's heart pounded, his mind scrambling for a plan. Then he spotted it, a maintenance hatch half hidden behind a pile of scrap. "There," he whispered, pointing. "If we can get underground, we might lose them." Mira nodded, her eyes locked on his, a silent agreement passing between them. They bolted for the hatch, Leo kicking aside the scrap as Mira pried it open. The hunters shouted, their boots pounding closer, but Leo and Mira slipped inside, dropping into a dark tunnel below. The hatch slammed shut behind them, muffling the chaos above. The tunnel was damp and cold, lit only by faint emergency strips along the walls. Their breaths echoed in the tight space, and Leo's hand found Mira's again, grounding them both. "We're not out of this yet," he said, his voice low, "but we're close to the safe house. You good?" She squeezed his hand, her markings casting a soft glow on his face. "With you?" "Yes." The words hit him harder than they should, a warmth spreading through his chest despite the danger. But before he could respond, a metallic clang echoed from the tunnel's entrance. The hunters had found the hatch. "Move!" Leo urged, pulling her deeper into the tunnels. They ran, the sound of pursuit growing louder, the hunters' modulated voices bouncing off the walls. The safe house was just ahead, a reinforced door glinting in the distance, but time was slipping away. They reached the door, Leo punching in a code from memory. It hissed open, revealing a small, dimly lit room stocked with supplies. They stumbled inside, the door sealing shut just as a plasma bolt scorched its surface. For a moment, silence reigned, broken only by their ragged breathing. Leo turned to Mira, his heart still racing. "We made it," he said, a relieved grin breaking through. She stepped closer, her markings pulsing slowly now, her eyes searching his. "You keep saving me," she murmured, her voice soft but heavy with meaning. "Why?" He swallowed, caught in the intensity of her gaze. Because I can't imagine not doing it. Her breath hitched, and she reached out, her fingers brushing his jaw, sending a spark through his skin. The air between them crackled, the danger outside forgotten for a heartbeat. But before they could close the distance, a sharp buzz cut through the room. The safe house's comms flared to life, and a familiar voice filled the space, one Leo hadn't heard in years. "Leo, you idiot," the voice drawled, laced with amusement. "You've got half of Zarathia's underworld after you, and that Auralian, she's not what you think." Leo froze, his blood running cold. The voice belonged to Finn, his old crewmate, a man he'd trusted with his life. Mira's eyes widened, her markings dimming as she sensed his shock. "Who is that?" she whispered. "Someone I thought was a friend," Leo said, his voice tight. He turned to the comms, his mind reeling. "Finn, what the hell are you talking about?" Laughter crackled through the speaker. "She's a fugitive. Leo, not just from slavers. Her own people want her dead. You're in over your head, and I'm not the only one watching." The comms cut off, leaving a deafening silence. Leo stared at Mira, his heart pounding with a mix of betrayal and doubt. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear. Not of the hunters, but of what he might think. "Leo," she started, her voice trembling. "I can explain." But the door shuddered, a muffled explosion rocking the safe house. The hunters were here, and Finn's words echoed in Leo's mind. Was Mira hiding something, or was this a trap set by the man he'd once called a brother? The walls were closing in, and the truth, whatever it was, would have to wait. The safe house trembled as another muffled explosion rocked the walls, the hunters' relentless assault hammering at the reinforced door. Inside, the air was thick with tension, the echo of Finn's betrayal lingering like a poison between Leo and Mira. Leo stood frozen, his eyes locked on her, searching for answers in the flickering glow of her bioluminescent markings. Her violet gaze held his, wide with fear and something deeper. Regret, maybe, or a plea for trust. The comms were silent now, but Finn's words clawed at him. "She's a fugitive. Her own people want her dead." "Leo," Mira said, her voice soft but urgent, barely audible over the distant thud of the hunters' breaching tools. "I swear, I didn't lie to you, but there's more to my story, things I couldn't tell you yet." He wanted to believe her, wanted to hold on to the fire that had sparked between them in the pod, but doubt gnawed at him. "Then tell me now," he said, his voice low, edged with frustration. "Because we're about to have company, and I need to know who I'm risking my life for." Her markings pulsed erratically, betraying her nerves. She stepped closer, her hand hovering near his, hesitant. "I was part of the resistance on Auralis, like I told you, but I wasn't just a fighter. I led them, and I made enemies. Not just the regime, but some of my own people who thought I went too far." Leo's brow furrowed. "Too far how?" Before she could answer, a loud clang reverberated through the room. The door buckled, a thin crack splitting its surface. Mira grabbed his arm, her touch electric despite the chaos. "We don't have time. You have to trust me. Leo, please." He stared into her eyes, torn between the instinct to protect her and the sting of Finn's warning. The door groaned again, and he made his choice. "Fine," he said, grabbing her hand. "But this conversation isn't over." They darted to the back of the safe house, where a narrow hatch led to an old service tunnel. Leo pried it open, the rusted hinges screeching in protest. "Ladies first," he said, managing a wry grin despite the pounding at the door. Mira's lips twitched, a flicker of amusement breaking through her fear. "Such a gentleman, even when we're about to die." "Gotta keep it classy," he shot back, the humor a brief spark in the darkness. They crawled into the tunnel, the cramped space forcing them close, their bodies brushing as they moved. The air was stale, thick with dust, and Leo's shoulder bumped against hers, sending a jolt through him he tried to ignore. This is cozy, he muttered, half to distract himself from the heat of her proximity. Mira let out a soft laugh, breathless. If I'd known escaping with you meant crawling through a glorified pipe, I might have stayed in the cell. He chuckled, but the sound died as a muffled explosion shook the tunnel. The hunters were through the door, their boots echoing above. Leo gestured for silence, his hand lingering on her arm, steadying them both. They crawled faster, the tunnel sloping downward into a maze of interconnected passages beneath Zarathia's undercity. The tunnel opened into a wider chamber, a forgotten maintenance hub littered with rusted tools and flickering holoscreens. Leo helped Mira to her feet, their hands lingering together a moment too long. Her markings glowed softly, casting shadows that danced across his face, and he caught himself staring, caught in the way her eyes seemed to pull him in. "Okay, spill it," he said, forcing his focus back to the moment. "What did Finn mean? Why do your own people want you dead?" Mira hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor. "The resistance. We were desperate. The regime was slaughtering us. So I made a deal with an off-world smuggler to get weapons. It saved lives, but it cost us too. Some in the resistance thought I betrayed our values, trading with criminals. They branded me a traitor." Leo's chest tightened. "That's why you were on that ship? Your own people turned you over?" She nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "I didn't want to drag you into this, Leo. I thought I could start over, but—" A sharp clatter cut her off. They spun toward the sound, Leo's hand instinctively shielding her. A figure emerged from the shadows, a wiry alien with 6 spindly arms, each clutching a tool or weapon. Its bulbous eyes glinted in the dim light, and it chittered in a language Leo didn't understand. "Friend or foe?" Leo whispered, his body tense. Mira's markings flared, her voice calm but firm. "Friend, I think—" The alien skittered closer, its movements jerky, and held out a small device that projected a holographic map. "Safe passage," it said in broken common, its voice like grinding gears. "For Aurelian, you pay—" Leo raised an eyebrow, glancing at Mira. "You know this guy?" She shook her head, but her eyes were sharp, calculating. "No, but Zarathia's undercity is full of opportunists. He's offering a way out, for a price." The alien chittered again, waving a credit scanner. Leo groaned. "Great. We're being extorted by a spider mechanic. My day's complete." Mira stifled a laugh, her hand brushing his arm, sending another spark through him. "We don't have much choice," she said, "unless you want to fight our way through those hunters." Leo dug into his pack, pulling out the last of his credits, a meager stash he'd saved for emergencies. "This better be worth it," he muttered, tossing the credits to the alien. The creature snatched them eagerly, its eyes gleaming, and activated the map. A glowing path snaked through the undercity, leading to a hidden dock. "Go fast," it said. "Hunters close." As if on cue, a distant thud echoed through the tunnels. The hunters were gaining. Leo grabbed Mira's hand, the map's light guiding them as they ran deeper into the maze. The alien scuttled ahead, its multiple arms clattering against the walls, leading them through twists and turns that seemed to defy logic. They emerged into a cavernous chamber, where a rickety shuttle sat on a makeshift platform. The alien gestured wildly, urging them aboard. But as Leo helped Mira climb in, the shuttle's hatch jammed, leaving them half exposed. "You've got to be kidding me," Leo groaned, slamming his fist against the controls. Mira leaned over, her shoulder brushing his as she examined the panel. "Let me," she said, her fingers moving with surprising deftness. Her markings pulsed, and the hatch groaned open, but not before their bodies pressed closer in the tight space, her warmth flooding his senses. "Nice trick," he said, his voice husky, caught off guard by the sudden closeness. She flashed a teasing smile, her eyes glinting. "You're not the only one who's handy, Leo." Before he could respond with a quip, the alien chittered a warning. Shadows moved at the chamber's entrance. Hunters, their weapons glinting. Leo's heart raced as he pulled Mira into the shuttle, slamming the controls to seal the hatch. The engines sputtered to life, but a plasma bolt struck the platform, shaking the entire structure. "Hold on!" Leo shouted, wrestling with the controls as the shuttle lurched upward. Mira gripped his arm, her markings blazing as the shuttle shot into a narrow tunnel. The hunters shot sizzling past. They cleared the tunnel, bursting into Zarathia's open sky, the city's neon sprawl stretching below. For a moment, they were free, the shuttle climbing toward safety. But as Leo glanced at Mira, her face pale in the cockpit's dim light, Finn's words echoed again. "She's not what you think." The shuttle's comms crackled, and a new voice cut through, a woman's, sharp and commanding. "Leo, you're flying straight into a trap," she said. "Mira's leading you to her allies, and they're not the resistance. Drop her now, or you're both dead." Mira's eyes widened, her hand tightening on his. "She's lying," she whispered, her voice desperate. "Leo, you have to believe me." The shuttle shook as something locked onto their signal, a new threat closing in. Leo's mind raced, torn between the woman's warning and the fire in Mira's eyes. The drama of their escape had just escalated, and the truth, whatever it was about to collide with them. The shuttle streaked through Zarathia's neon-lit sky, its engines roaring as Leo wrestled with the controls, dodging the tracking signal that pulsed ominously on the dashboard. The woman's voice from the comms still echoed in his mind, sharp, accusing, warning him that Mira was leading him into a trap. But Mira's hand, warm and steady on his arm, anchored him to the moment. Her violet eyes, wide with desperation, pleaded for trust, and despite the chaos, Leo couldn't shake the pull between them. The shuttle shuddered as another signal pinged. Closer now, and he knew they had minutes at best before whatever was hunting them caught up. "We need to lose them," Leo said, his voice tight as he banked the shuttle toward a dense cluster of towering spires, their lights blurring into streaks of color. "There's a canyon network outside the city. If we can make it there, we might shake them." Mira nodded, her markings pulsing softly, casting a faint glow across the cockpit. "I trust you," she said, her voice low, almost intimate, sending a shiver through him despite the danger. Her hand lingered on his arm, her fingers brushing against his skin, and the air between them crackled with unspoken tension. The shuttle dove into the canyon, the walls of jagged rock closing in as Leo navigated the tight turns. The pursuing signal flickered on the screen, struggling to keep up. For a moment, it seemed they'd escaped, and the cockpit fell silent, save for the hum of the engines and their synchronized breathing. Leo glanced at Mira, her face illuminated by the soft light of her markings, and his pulse quickened. She was close, too close, their shoulders brushing in the cramped space, her warmth radiating through the thin fabric of her clothes. "You're staring," she said, a teasing lilt in her voice, though her eyes held a deeper intensity. He swallowed, caught off guard. "Can you blame me? You're glowing. Literally." Her lips curved into a smile, playful but charged with something heavier. "It's not just the markings, Leo. You feel it too, don't you?" Her voice dropped, a velvet whisper that wrapped around him, stirring something deep in his chest. He opened his mouth to respond, but the shuttle lurched, a warning beep shattering the moment. The tracking signal was back, stronger now, and a shadow loomed on the scanner, a sleek, predatory ship closing in. Leo cursed under his breath, his hands tightening on the controls. "Hold on," he said, pushing the shuttle into a dizzying spiral to evade a sudden burst of plasma fire. Mira gripped the seat, her markings flaring brighter as the shuttle rocked. "They're relentless," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "But you're good at this. Better than I expected." He flashed a grin, adrenaline and her words fueling him. "Stick around. I'm full of surprises." The canyon opened into a moonlit basin, and Leo spotted a cave mouth carved into the rock, a perfect place to hide. He guided the shuttle inside, the engines whining as they powered down. The cave was dark, its walls glistening with strange minerals that caught the glow of Mira's markings. The pursuing ship's signal faded, lost in the canyon's interference, and for the first time in hours, they were still. Leo exhaled, slumping back in his seat. We're safe. For now. Mira unstrapped herself, her movements fluid as she leaned closer, her eyes locking onto his. You keep saying that, she murmured, her voice soft but heavy with meaning. And every time, I believe you a little more. The cockpit felt smaller, the air thick with the heat of their closeness. Leo's heart raced as she reached out, her fingers tracing the edge of his jaw, her touch sending a spark through him. Mira, he said, his voice rough, we're in the middle of a chase. This isn't the time. Her smile was slow, deliberate, her markings pulsing in a rhythm that matched his heartbeat. Is it ever the right time, she asked, her voice a low hum that seemed to vibrate through him. She leaned closer, her breath warm against his cheek, her body just inches from his. You saved me, Leo. You keep saving me. Let me thank you. His breath hitched, caught in the pull of her gaze, the way her markings seemed to dance for him alone. The cave's dim light cast her in a soft glow, her curves outlined by the faint shimmer of her clothes. He wanted to pull away, to focus on the danger, but her presence was intoxicating, her touch a magnet he couldn't resist. You don't owe me anything, he said, but his voice betrayed him, laced with a hunger he couldn't hide. Maybe I want to, she whispered, her fingers sliding to the back of his neck, pulling him closer. Her lips hovered near his, the space between them charged with anticipation. The world outside, the hunters, the betrayal, the lies faded, leaving only the heat of her breath, the soft press of her body against his in the cramped cockpit. Their lips met, tentative at first, then deepening with a need that surprised them both. Her kiss was warm, electric, her markings flaring brighter, as if responding to the intensity between them. Leo's hands found her waist, pulling her closer, the fabric of her clothes soft under his fingers. She pressed herself against him, her curves fitting perfectly against his frame, and for a moment, the danger was a distant memory, replaced by the fire of their connection. Mira pulled back slightly, her eyes half-lidded, her breath uneven. Your song, she murmured, her voice husky. It's louder now, stronger. Leo laughed softly, his forehead resting against hers. You and your songs. What's mine saying? She smiled, her fingers tracing lazy patterns on his chest. That you want this as much as I do. He couldn't argue with that. His hand slid up her arm, brushing the glowing lines of her markings, marveling at the way they pulsed under his touch. You're not wrong, he said, his voice low, a playful edge cutting through the heat. But if we're going to keep this up, maybe we pick a spot that's not about to get blasted. Her laugh was soft, teasing, as she leaned in again, her lips brushing his ear. Spoil sport, she whispered, but there was no mistaking the warmth in her tone. The moment was shattered by a sharp crackle from the comms. Leo, you're out of time. The woman's voice from before cut through, cold and mocking. You think that cave hides you? We're coming, and your little Auralian won't save you. Mira tensed, her markings dimming as she pulled back, her eyes wide with alarm. Leo's jaw clenched, the heat of their moment giving way to the cold reality of their situation. Who is she? Mira asked, her voice steady but laced with fear. I don't know, Leo said, his hand still lingering on her waist, reluctant to let go. But she knows too much, and she's not working alone. The scanner pinged, a new signal closing in fast. The cave wouldn't shield them for long. Leo grabbed the controls, his mind racing as he powered up the shuttle. Mira's hand found his, her touch a reminder of what they were fighting for. We'll face this together, she said, her voice firm, her eyes burning with resolve. Leo nodded, a grin tugging at his lips despite the danger. Together, he echoed, the word carrying more weight than he'd expected. The shuttle roared back to life, ready to dive back into the fray. Whatever awaited them outside, the bond between them had deepened, a fire kindled in the heat of the night. But the hunters were closing in, and the truth about Mira and the mysterious woman hunting them was about to unravel. The shuttle's engines roared as Leo guided it out of the cave, the jagged rocks scraping the hull as they shot back into Zarathia's night sky. The canyon walls blurred past, illuminated by the faint glow of Mira's bioluminescent markings, which pulsed in time with her quickening breath. Her hand rested on Leo's, a steady anchor amidst the chaos, their connection a quiet strength against the looming threat. The mysterious woman's voice still echoed in Leo's mind, her warning laced with a chilling certainty that gnawed at him. Whoever she was, she knew too much. About Mira, about him, about everything. The scanner beeped frantically, the pursuing ship's signal growing stronger, a predator closing in on its prey. "Leo, we can't keep running like this," Mira said, her voice steady but tinged with urgency as she leaned closer. Her warmth a stark contrast to the cold dread creeping up his spine. "They're too fast. We need a plan." He nodded, his jaw tight, eyes scanning the horizon for any advantage. "There's a trading outpost a few miles east. If we can reach it, we might find cover, or allies." His voice carried a grim determination, but the weight of their earlier moment in the cave lingered, her touch still burning in his memory. Her violet eyes met his, a flicker of gratitude softening her gaze. "You're still fighting for me," she murmured, her fingers brushing his wrist, sending a shiver through him. "Even after everything, especially after everything," he said, his voice low, a spark of defiance cutting through the tension. "But you're going to have to tell me the whole truth soon. Mira, no more secrets." She opened her mouth to respond, but a sudden jolt rocked the shuttle, a plasma bolt grazing the hull with a screech of metal. Leo swerved, narrowly dodging another shot, the controls vibrating under his hands. Mira gripped the seat, her markings flaring brighter, casting wild shadows across the cockpit. "They're right behind us," she warned, her voice sharp. The scanner showed the enemy ship, sleek, black, and bristling with weapons, hot on their tail. Leo pushed the shuttle to its limits, the engines screaming as they skimmed over the canyon's edge, the trading outpost's faint lights glinting in the distance. But the pursuing ship was relentless, its weapons locking on with deadly precision. Another bolt struck, shaking the shuttle, and a warning light flared on the dashboard. Engine damage. "We're not going to make it to the outpost," Leo said, his voice grim as he wrestled with the failing controls. "We need to land. Now." Mira pointed to a cluster of rocky outcroppings below, half hidden in the moonlight. "There. It's our best shot." He didn't argue. The shuttle dove, skidding across the rocky terrain with a bone-rattling crash. Dust and sparks filled the air as they came to a stop, the cockpit dimming as the systems flickered out. For a moment, silence reigned, broken only by their heavy breathing. Leo unstrapped himself, turning to Mira. Her markings glowed softly, her face pale but resolute. "You okay?" he asked, his hand brushing hers, the contact grounding them both. She nodded, her eyes locked on his. "As long as I'm with you." The words hit him hard, reigniting the fire that had sparked between them in the cave. But before he could respond, the comms crackled again, the woman's voice cutting through like a blade. "You can't hide, Leo. Not from me. Not from her past." Leo's blood ran cold, but it was Mira's reaction that stopped him short. Her markings dimmed, her body tensing as if struck. "No," she whispered, her voice barely audible, laced with a fear he hadn't seen before. "Who is she? Mira," he demanded, his voice low but urgent. "What's she talking about?" Mira's gaze dropped, her hands trembling. I didn't want you to find out like this." The shuttle's hatch groaned, the sound of approaching footsteps echoing outside. Leo grabbed her shoulders, his eyes searching hers. "Find out what?" "Mira, talk to me." She took a shaky breath, her voice barely above a whisper. That woman, she's my sister. Kyle. The revelation hit Leo like a punch, his mind reeling. Your sister? Why the hell is she hunting you? Mira's eyes glistened, her markings flickering erratically. She was part of the resistance too, but when I made that deal with the smugglers, she thought I'd betrayed everything we fought for. She swore to bring me back to Auralis, to face judgment. I didn't know she'd go this far. Leo's heart pounded, the weight of her words sinking in. The hunters weren't just slavers or mercenaries. They were led by Mira's own blood, a sister driven by vengeance. The footsteps grew louder, and the shuttle's hatch shuddered as something heavy struck it. We don't have time for this, he said, pulling her toward the back of the cockpit. We need to move. But Mira hesitated, her eyes pleading. Leo, if Kale catches me, she won't just take me back. She'll kill me. And you, if you're in her way. He cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheek, her markings warm under his touch. Then we don't let her catch us, he said, his voice fierce. You hear me? I'm not losing you. Her breath hitched, and for a fleeting moment, the world narrowed to just them. The heat of her skin, the pull of her gaze, the unspoken promise between them. Then the hatch exploded inward, shrapnel flying as cloaked figures stormed the shuttle. Leo shoved Mira behind him, grabbing a wrench from the floor as a makeshift weapon. The hunters spread out, their plasma rifles glinting, but at their center stood a woman, tall with the same violet eyes as Mira, her own bioluminescent markings pulsing with a cold, furious light. Kyle, Mira whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and sorrow. Kyle's gaze locked onto her sister, her expression hard as steel. You ran. Mira, you betrayed us. And now you've dragged this human into your mess. Her eyes flicked to Leo, a flicker of curiosity breaking her icy demeanor. He's brave, foolish, but brave. Step aside, human, and I might let you live. Leo tightened his grip on the wrench, stepping forward instead. Not a chance, he said, his voice steady despite the odds. You want her. You go through me. Kale's lips curled into a smirk, but there was no warmth in it. So be it. The hunters raised their weapons, and Leo braced himself, Mira's hand gripping his arm as they faced the impossible. But then, a low hum filled the air, and the ground beneath them shook. A massive shadow loomed outside the shuttle, a third ship, its hull scarred and bristling with unfamiliar tech. The hunters froze, their attention shifting as a new voice crackled through the comms, this one deep and commanding. Stand down. Kyle, it said. The Auralian is under our protection now. Kyle's eyes widened, her markings flaring with shock. Mira gasped, her grip on Leo tightening. That's impossible, she whispered. That's the voice of the resistance leader. I thought he was dead. Leo's mind raced, the twist hitting him like a shockwave. The resistance? A new player in this deadly game? The shuttle trembled as the third ship landed, its hatch opening to reveal a figure cloaked in shadow, their presence radiating authority. Whoever they were, they just changed everything, and Leo and Mira were caught in the crossfire of a war they barely understood. The air in the crashed shuttle grew thick with tension as the mysterious new ship settled outside, its engines humming like a predator's growl. Dust swirled through the jagged hole where the hatch had been, and Leo stood firm, wrench gripped tightly, shielding Mira from Kale and her hunters. Mira's markings pulsed erratically, her hand clutching Leo's arm as her violet eyes darted between her sister and the shadowy figure emerging from the third ship. The resistance leader's voice, thought to be long dead, still echoed in their ears, a bombshell that had shifted the battlefield. Whoever this newcomer was, they'd just thrown a wrench into an already chaotic fight, and Leo wasn't sure whether to be relieved or on guard. Kale's cold smirk faltered, her own markings flaring with uncertainty as she turned toward the new arrival. You're supposed to be dead. Orin, she spat, her voice laced with venom. The regime crushed your rebellion years ago. The figure stepped into the dim light, revealing a tall, imposing Auralian with intricate, glowing patterns across his skin, more elaborate than Mira's or Kyle's. His presence commanded the space, his eyes a piercing silver that seemed to see through everyone. "Rumors of my death were useful," Orin said, his voice deep and resonant, carrying a weight that silenced even the hunters. "But I'm very much alive. Kyle, and Mira is under my protection." Leo's grip on the wrench tightened, his mind racing. Protection? Or another cage? He glanced at Mira, whose expression was a storm of emotions. Shock, hope, and something like guilt. "You know him?" he whispered, his voice low, trying to keep the growing unease at bay. Mira's breath hitched, her markings dimming slightly. "Orin was my mentor in the Resistance. I thought he died in a raid." "I never thought—" She cut off, her eyes flicking to Kale, who was watching her with a mix of fury and betrayal. "Enough!" Kyle snapped, her rifle still raised, though her hands trembled slightly. "You don't get to claim her. Orin, she betrayed us, sold our cause to smugglers. She's a traitor, and I'll drag her back to Auralis myself." Orin's silver eyes narrowed, but his voice remained calm, almost mocking. "A traitor? Or the only one brave enough to make the hard choices? You've always been too rigid. Kyle, it's why you'll never lead." The words hit like a spark in a powder keg. Kyle's markings blazed, and she took a step forward, her hunters mirroring her aggression. Leo instinctively pulled Mira closer, his body shielding hers. But the movement drew Kel's attention. Her gaze flicked to him, and a cruel smile curved her lips. "And you, human," she said, her tone dripping with disdain. "What's your stake in this? Love struck already? Or just stupid?" Leo's jaw clenched, but he couldn't resist a retort. "Little of both, maybe, but I'm not the one chasing my own sister across the galaxy. So maybe ease up on the family drama." Mira stifled a laugh, her hand squeezing his arm, and even Orin's lips twitched in amusement. Kyle's face darkened, her markings flaring brighter. "You'll regret that," she hissed, raising her rifle. Before she could fire, Orin raised a hand, and a low hum filled the air. The hunters' weapons flickered, their power disrupted, just as Mira had done in the alley. "Stand down, Kale," Orin said, his voice now edged with steel. "Or you'll face more than my words." The standoff held for a tense moment, the air crackling with unspoken threats. Then, to everyone's surprise, Mira stepped forward, pulling free of Leo's grip. "Stop it, both of you," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "Kyle, I never betrayed the Resistance. The deal I made saved lives, hundreds of them. And Orin, if you're alive, why didn't you come for me? I was rotting in that cell, thinking you were gone." The raw pain in her voice cut through the tension, and Leo's heart ached at the vulnerability she rarely showed. Orin's expression softened, but Kale's eyes only hardened. "You don't get to play the victim," Kyle said, her voice low and dangerous. "You chose your path." "And you chose yours," Mira shot back, her markings blazing. "Hunting me like I'm the enemy? We're supposed to be family." The word hung heavy, and for a moment, Kale faltered, her rifle lowering slightly. Leo seized the chance, stepping between them. "Look, I don't know your whole deal," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "But we're all about to get blasted if we don't move. So how about we table the sibling rivalry and get out of here?" Orin chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that broke the tension. "The human has a point. Kale, your hunters are outmatched. My ship's cloaked, and I've got reinforcements waiting. Leave now, or you won't walk away." Kale's eyes darted between Orin, Mira, and Leo, her markings pulsing with barely contained rage. Finally, she lowered her rifle, signaling her hunters to stand down. "This isn't over," she said, her voice a venomous promise. "Mira, you'll face justice. And you, human, watch your back." She turned, her hunters following, and disappeared into the night. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the distant hum of Oren's ship. Leo exhaled, his shoulders sagging, but the weight of Mira's secrets and Kale's threat lingered. Oren turned to Mira, his expression unreadable. "We need to talk. Mira, alone." Leo's protective instinct flared, and he stepped closer to her. "She's not going anywhere without me," he said, his voice firm but tinged with an awkward defiance that made Mira smile despite the tension. Oren raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "Loyal, isn't he? Fine. Human. You can come, but don't expect a warm welcome." They followed Oren to his ship, a sleek vessel hidden by advanced cloaking tech. Inside, the air was cool, the walls lined with glowing panels that hummed with energy. Oren led them to a small chamber, where he gestured for them to sit. But as Leo settled next to Mira, their knees brushing in the tight space, an awkward moment struck. His hand grazed hers, and her markings flared, casting a soft glow that made him hyper-aware of her closeness. He shifted, trying to focus, but the memory of their kiss in the cave flooded back, heating his skin. Mira caught his glance, her lips twitching with a teasing smile. "Nervous. Leo," she whispered, her voice low enough that Oren couldn't hear. He cleared his throat, his face flushing. "Just trying not to start a war in here," he muttered, nodding toward Oren, who was busy at a console. She laughed softly, the sound easing the tension, but her hand lingered near his, her fingers brushing his wrist. "You're doing fine," she murmured, her eyes glinting with mischief. Oren turned back, his silver eyes narrowing as he caught the exchange. "Focus, both of you," he said, though there was a hint of amusement in his tone. "Mira, your deal with the smugglers didn't just anger Kale. It exposed a larger network, one the regime's been hunting. They're after you, but they're also after something you have." Leo frowned, glancing at Mira. "What's he talking about?" Mira's markings dimmed, her expression tightening. "I stole something from the smugglers, a data crystal. It holds secrets about the regime's plans, experiments, weapons, things that could destroy Auralis." Leo's jaw dropped. "You've been carrying that this whole time, and you didn't tell me?" She winced, her hand squeezing his. "I didn't want to drag you deeper into this. I thought I could handle it." Oren's gaze softened, but his voice was firm. "That crystal is why Kale's hunting you, and why the regime won't stop. We need to get it to the resistance. Mira, but first, we need to survive." A loud beep interrupted, the ship's sensors flaring. Oren spun to the console, his face darkening. "Kyle didn't leave," he said. "She's called reinforcements. They're surrounding us." Leo's heart sank, but he grabbed Mira's hand, his grin defiant. "Guess we're not done running yet. Got any more tricks up your sleeve?" Mira's eyes sparkled, a mix of fear and determination. "Stick with me, and you'll see." The ship shuddered as something struck its hull, the drama escalating as Kale's forces closed in. Leo and Mira were bound by secrets, trust, and a spark that refused to fade. But the noose was tightening, and the truth was a dangerous game they couldn't afford to lose. The ship lurched violently, its hull groaning under the barrage of plasma fire from Kale's reinforcements. Inside, the command chamber buzzed with urgency, Oren's hands flying across the console as he barked orders to his unseen crew. Leo and Mira stood close, their hands still clasped, the spark between them a quiet strength amidst the chaos. The data crystal Mira had stolen, a tiny, glowing shard now resting in Oren's secure vault, held the key to Auralis' future. But Kale's forces were determined to bury that hope in fire. The ship's sensors screamed, showing a tightening net of enemy vessels, and Leo's heart pounded as he met Mira's gaze, her violet eyes burning with defiance. "We're not going down like this," Leo said, his voice steady despite the odds. "You've got that crystal, and we've got Oren. We can still win this." Mira's markings pulsed, a soft smile breaking through her tension. "You never give up, do you?" she murmured, her fingers tightening around his. "That's why I'm still here." Oren glanced over, his silver eyes sharp but approving. "Save the sentiment for later," he said, a rare hint of warmth in his tone. "We're breaking through their blockade. My crew's rigged a pulse wave to disable their weapons, but it'll be tight. Strap in." Leo and Mira scrambled to the nearest seats, their shoulders brushing as they secured the harnesses. The ship shuddered again, a warning light flashing as the hull took another hit. Leo reached for Mira's hand, their fingers intertwining, and she leaned closer, her warmth grounding him. "If this is it," she whispered, her voice soft but fierce, "I'm glad it's with you." He grinned, his heart swelling despite the danger. "Not it yet, Mira. We've got a planet to save." The ship's engines roared, a sudden surge of power throwing them back as Oren executed his plan. A brilliant pulse of energy erupted from the vessel, rippling through the enemy fleet. The sensors showed Kale's ships faltering, their weapon systems glitching, and Leo let out a whoop of relief. "Nice one, Oren!" he called, earning a rare smirk from the Auralian leader. But Kale wasn't done. Her voice crackled through the comms, raw with fury. "You think this ends here, Mira? You'll never be free. I'll hunt you to the stars." Mira's markings dimmed, her face paling, but she leaned toward the comms, her voice steady. "Kale, I didn't betray you. I fought for our people, just like you. Come back to us. We can fix this, together." Silence stretched, heavy and fraught, and for a moment, Leo thought Kale might respond. But the comms cut off, and the sensors showed her ship retreating, vanishing into Zarathia's orbit. Leo squeezed Mira's hand, his chest tight with hope and worry. "She heard you," he said softly. "Maybe that's a start." Oren turned from the console, his expression unreadable. "She's gone for now, but Cal's stubborn. We'll deal with her later. Right now, we need to get that crystal to the resistance base on Netheria. It's our best chance to expose the regime." The ship stabilized, its course set for Netheria, and the tension in the chamber eased, replaced by a cautious relief. Leo unstrapped himself, helping Mira to her feet, their hands lingering together. Oren excused himself to check on the crew, leaving them alone in the dim light of the command chamber. Mira's markings glowed softly, casting a warm glow across Leo's face, and he couldn't help but smile. "What?" she asked, her voice teasing, though her eyes held a deeper question. "Just thinking," he said, his tone playful but sincere, "that running from pirates, hunters, and angry sisters wasn't exactly on my to-do list, but I'd do it all again for you." Her laugh was soft, musical, and she stepped closer, her body brushing against his. "You're impossible," she murmured, her fingers tracing the edge of his jaw, sending a spark through him. "But I'm glad you're here." Their lips met, a slow, tender kiss that carried the weight of everything they'd survived. Her markings flared, wrapping them in a soft glow, and Leo pulled her closer, savoring the warmth of her body, the promise of something new. When they parted, her eyes sparkled with mischief. "You're getting better at that," she teased. He chuckled, his forehead resting against hers. "Practice makes perfect." The ship hummed around them, carrying them toward Netheria, where the resistance waited. Days later, they landed on the lush, purple-skied planet, its forests alive with the same shimmering energy as Mira's markings. The resistance base was a hidden stronghold, buzzing with fighters who greeted Oren with reverence and Mira with cautious respect. Leo, the lone human, drew curious glances, but Mira's hand in his silenced any doubts. The data crystal proved its worth, revealing the regime's plans, bioweapons, mass surveillance, and a plot to strip Auralis of its resources. With Oren's leadership and Mira's knowledge, the resistance rallied, broadcasting the truth across the planet. Protests erupted, the regime's grip weakening as Auralians rose up, inspired by the sister who'd risked everything. Mira and Leo stood on a balcony overlooking Netheria's glowing forests, the stars bright above. "You could go back," she said, her voice soft, her markings pulsing gently. "Earth's safe. You don't have to stay in this fight." He turned to her, his grin unwavering. "Safe's overrated. Besides, I've got a partner to keep out of trouble." Her smile was radiant, her hand slipping into his. "Partner? Huh? I like the sound of that." They leaned into each other, the future uncertain but bright. Kyle was still out there, her path unknown. But Mira held hope for reconciliation. The resistance grew stronger, Auralis' freedom within reach, and Leo and Mira faced it together, their bond forged in fire and starlight. As Netheria's moons rose, casting a silver glow over the forest, Leo pulled Mira close, their laughter echoing into the night. The universe was vast, full of dangers and wonders, but with her by his side, he was ready for anything. Their story wasn't over. It was just beginning.